Welcome and thanks for pressing play. This episode of WarDocs was made possible by a partnership with the Defense Strategies Institute's OP Med TV and was recorded at the 2024 Operational Medicine Symposium in San Antonio. These interviews focus on optimizing military medicine through the modernization and implementation of policies, education, training, research, and development. We also explore emerging technologies to enhance the health, strength, and survivability of warfighters. Welcome to this edition of WarDocs in partnership with OP Med TV. I'm your host, Dr. Doug Soderdahl, retired Army urologist, and I'm joined today by Major General Jill Harris. She is the director of the Joint Surgeon General's Office, and she is in the National Guard, so Compo 2. Thanks for being part of WarDocs today.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your current job. What's at the kind of front burner issues?
Right. So as being the Joint Surgeon for the Army National Guard, I have purview over the Air and Army National Guard. The reality is, I'm part of the joint staff that works for General Hoganson, who serves on the Chairman's Joint Chiefs of Staff. We have oversight, but we don't have control. We're, a bureau.
Right.
So a bureau means that you have directors. So I'm the director of the Joint Surgeon's Office, right? We command nothing. However, we provide oversight, policy, guidance, and resources. And so resources are usually the thing that gets people's attention, right? We can provide them resources to do things. So they have within their chain of command within the Air Force and the Army National Guards, respectively. I get into that joint space. So I get into the space of global health engagements as it relates to our state partnership program. I get into the space of civilian military trauma training, and we get some funds and resources from Congress in that space. I get into the space of the CBRNE space. So the National Guard has presence in our civil support teams. We have HERFs and SERFs, and there's a medical element there, whether it's decontamination or treatment. We provide oversight and training into that space. And then the other things that are germane to the service, it's good for me to have situational awareness. In my role, I get the opportunity to sit in medical strategic meetings that involve the deputy surgeons and surgeon generals of the respective services. So I get to get that reserve component flavor in at the meeting. Even though the services represent their total force, they don't live and operate in that space, and so oftentimes I carry the water not only for the National Guard, Air and Army Guard, but for all the reserve components.
So tell us a little bit more about that total force concept. How does Compo 2, National Guard, Compo 3, the reserves, how does that work with active duty to provide that military health system?
Right. So part of the military health system is the health system that we provide care in, which is primarily done by the active component, Compo 1. At a point in our past, Compo 3 had the backfill mission. That mission may come back. We don't know. We'll see how the studies get done to determine what are the shortages we have. The National Guard really isn't operate in that space. We operate solely in the operational medicine space. So in the early 90s, a bunch of people got together, had far more stars on their shoulder than I did, and they sat down around a table, and I'm imagining they had a cup of coffee, and they were talking about force structure and what we had that reside in the Army Reserve, what we had in the Army National Guard, and they said, listen, we want to put like things. So the decision was made, anything above Role 3 or higher, medical, would go into the Army Reserve, and then the Army Guard would have combat. So the type of medical forces that we have in the Army National Guard are Role 1, Role 2. We primarily support the brigade combat teams.
Right.
We do have a few area support medical companies, ground ambulance companies in that space. And so that's the way we've operated. And so with that, the way that we really operate in that operational space. But as you know, the National Guard has both a state and federal mission. Sometimes we find ourselves being the easy button, if you will.
Right.
If you need a bus driver, call the Guard. If you need a teacher, call the Guard. If you have COVID operations, call the Guard. If you need to man a food bank, call the Guard. If you have a flood, a fire, hurricane, call the Guard. Civil unrest, call the Guard. So we have to be ready all the time. And so medical readiness and the ability to get after things is very important all the time, not just when we get called to go do a mission overseas someplace to support our active duty. We have to be ready all the time.
So tell me more about it. I was interested to see that the National Guard had a big part in global health engagement.
Yes.
So tell me more about that. That's interesting.
In fact, the Air Force has given us a fully trained global health engagement officer. So Colonel Geist is on my team in the Joint Surgeons Office, and we really leverage this relationship with global health and partner it with the State Partnership Program. So the State Partnership Program has been around for about a little over 30 years. The State Department said, hey, we've got this great idea. As the wall was coming down, and the Soviet Union was breaking up, we were like, we want to help these countries. How can we help? Well, let's get our military in there to help partner with them as they're standing up these countries. And active duty, for whatever reason, said, hey, we just don't have the bandwidth. And so it was given to the National Guard. So the National Guard, it's actually a perfect relationship. Because if you think about it, the National Guard we are citizens, soldiers, and airmen.
Right.
We grow up in our ranks through our organizations, as do they in their countries. So, for example, I'm an Ohio Guardswoman. We have partnership programs with Serbia and Hungary. And one of the things that I did while I was working in the role as the deputy state surgeon in Ohio is I did a trilateral partnership. So I brought people from Serbia to come to Hungary. Now, they haven't always liked each other, right? And then we were there. But the thing that brought us all together and the common language we spoke was medicine. They were in different places in their abilities. So we did combat lifesaver, and we did 68 whiskey training, and showed them how we trained people to take care of people, even if you weren't a medical person. So no one was offended because Serbia was farther behind than Hungary was in this partnership. And when we first came together, it was like a junior high prom. Like boys are on one side of the room, girls are on the other side of the room. By the end of the week, with our training that we did together, in the classroom, with interpreters, hands-on training out in the field. By the time we were done, we were all having dinner together and toasting together, and these are lifelong friends. And so global health engagements is a very soft way to get into a country, no matter what's going on, civil unrest, whatever. The one thing we know we can bring into a country in our partnership program is medical, and we do that. We have over 100 countries we participate with, and medical is a key component. And we've really been trying to leverage that to work closely with the services, the COCOM commanders, as well as the State Department. So it's sort of this balance. COCOM commanders have a mission, State Department has a mission, our governor, in conjunction with the leader of that country, has a mission. And so we try to maneuver in that space to be everything to everyone.
Yeah. One of the things that COVID kind of brought to the forefront was this idea of pandemic, biological, seaborne type things that possibly could happen.
Oh, absolutely.
So you also mentioned that the National Guard has, a seaborne mission.
We do.
And personally, that scares me more than a lot of stuff.
Right.
So what are you doing to prepare for that, and how are people trained to deal with those threats?
Sure. So we have full-time forces and we have part-time forces that work in that. So let me talk about the full-time team. Every state has at least one civil support team, and they work suburban response. So let's say we find white powder in an envelope and people don't know what it is. They make a phone call. Eventually the phone call comes to the Guard. The Guard will respond because we have it's a 21-person team. They have the ability to have communications when there's no communications. They have the ability to pull people out of rubble, and they have the ability to test medically what's going on. So we have a full lab. We get in our big suits, we get the white substance, we go into our lab in the back of a vehicle, and we test it to figure out what it is. Oh, it's talcum powder. Or whatever,
sugar,
right. Thank goodness, that's what it is. But we created that space because we saw 15 years ago that there was a real need for that response immediately before we could get other federal aspects there to respond. Then what we also have regionally is we have HERFs and SERFs, and they work even more expanded. So let's say a building explodes, there's rubble, right? And let's say the building that exploded was the fire department. So the fire department can't respond, so we need people to respond. So we call people up that can do search and extraction, can do decontamination, can do medical treatment, treat to release to the next level, higher level of care. And so what we do in the Joint Surgeon's Office is we oversee the medical training that happens in all three of those spaces. We ensure that formularies are up to date, that people are being evaluated and tested so that they know how to do all their jobs. So the CST, those are full-time people. The HERFs and SURF have a very small footprint of full-time people. It's a job that people get called in to do. And so it's very important as we have people come in and off of that team to be able to train them so they know their individual things as well as collectively their skills as a team, whatever function that they have. So sleep well at night knowing we do have those functionalities throughout the United States.
Powdered sugar.
And we hope it's always powdered sugar, right?
Powder.
Right, yes.
So this is very interesting to me because I didn't realize how broad the portfolio of National Guard medicine was. Yeah. What else would people be surprised to hear about what the National Guard does in the operational medicine space? So
I would say what's surprising to people is the duality that we have, right? So we have that state mission and we have the federal mission. So the National Guard is under what's called Title 32 status. So the active duty and the reserve component, they fall under Title 10. So you have a single mission, you called upon when Congress or the President alerts you to go do something. Whereas the National Guard has two commanders-in-chief. We have the governor of the state or territory in which we are assigned to, and we have the President of the United States. So we can be called up for state active duty. So let's think civil unrest in Minnesota, when they had civil unrest, when we had the fatality. That was involved with the police force, right? There was a lot of civil unrest going on. So the force was called up by the governor to provide security and stabilize what was happening in the area. So they were on state active duty. We have 27 different statuses that we can be in the National Guard. And so it's very complicated. So when you say, well, General Faris, can you do this? And I say, well, it depends. It depends on what status you're in or what status you may evolve to. Initially on state active duty, then it evolves to being put on Title 32 or to be federalized to be on Title 10. There are different benefits and things associated with that. So I think what surprises people is when I say we have 27 different ways of being able to do a mission. And so when people say, sometimes it could be challenging to get the Guard to come, it's not that it's challenging, it's that we have to follow rules. And the answer is it depends on what status we're in. Who's going to pay, how we can get there, all those kinds of things.
So not to get too political in,
yes.
in the it depends category, but what if the priorities of those two bosses, the governor and the federal government, are not simpatico exactly? Right. How does that get resolved?
So I will tell you that in almost all of our states, we have a person that commands the Air and Army National Guard. They're called the Adjutant General, or we call them the TAG, T-A-G, the TAG. The TAG in most states works in the governor's cabinet, and they're appointed to that position. So there is a level of politics involved because, whoever's in office picks a person that they want to have,
right,
run their state militia, both Air and Army National Guard. The space where we get into is when the governor wants to call us out to do something, then his advisor on the cabinet, who's the adjutant general, will say, well, sir or ma'am, we have units that are getting ready to deploy, and so these are only how many units we have left. So if you need somebody, it's going to have to be from these kinds of units, and I would advise you that you should use those kinds of units, less risk to force. So it is a balancing thing. At times during COVID, it was very challenging because we had mobilization missions and we had COVID missions going on.
Right.
We are very able to work with leadership and advise them on how we feel would be the best way to utilize the forces, and we've been able to move forward with that.
So tell me a little bit about your personal journey into Army medicine. How did you initially follow that path?
So I got in when I was 17 years old. I was a junior in high school, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to pay for college. And so I decided I would join the National Guard because they had a great tuition reimbursement program. At that time, it was 50% tuition reimbursement. And my dad had been serving in the Guard. I just grew up knowing my dad being a guardsman, and he would go away mysteriously one weekend a month, and then he would be gone for 2 weeks in the summer and come back with a stuffed animal or something. I mean, so these are my memories.
That was normal.
It was normal. It was just normal. And there was no push like you should join the military. But as the oldest of 3 girls, I said, I got to figure out how to pay for school. And it was just time and money. And I said, I can do 1 week in a month and earn this much money and have these benefits and serve my country, or I can go flip hamburgers. This one out, right? So I started the journey. We have a program that's called the Split Option Program. So between my junior and senior year of high school, I went to my basic training, which was at Fort Leonard Wood. I got in a few years ago. I went to basic training in 1982. In 1982, we were doing experimental co-ed training, and I was the last group of people going through Fort Leonard Wood to determine whether or not men and women could train together. Well, now years later, we know we can train together, right? But I was in that experimental company. When I came back from that, I finished my senior year of high school, which seemed like a cakewalk after basic training. And then when I graduated from high school, I went to do my advanced individualized training. And when I was enlisted, I was a personnel records specialist, and I was assigned to a 155 self-propelled howitzer battalion. I got the experience of, being with moving and shooting, and right. What originally got me in to pay for school was not what kept me in. What kept me in was my sense of adventure and duty and getting to do things that I would never even imagine to do. So I got my commission through ROTC at South Dakota State University. And when I got commissioned, I didn't want to be a personnelist. I really wanted to be a medical service corps officer. But because my undergraduate degree was in broadcast journalism and I was a personnel record specialist, they made me an AG officer.
Right.
So I went to AG school, got trained, and then immediately branch transferred and found a medical unit to be in. And so November of '87 is when I started my journey in the medical community. And I've been all kinds of jobs in the brigade, Fordsport Battalion, Division, the headquarters throughout my career. And never in my wildest dreams would I ever have imagined that I would end up as a 2-star general sitting before you talking about my 42 years of it. Jungle gym, not a straight line in my career, jungle gym kind of career.
So on WarDocs, we do have some younger folks that listen in and some high school, college folks. What advice would you give them if they said, you know what, I'm thinking about this military medicine thing. I don't know if I want to be a corpsman, medic, nurse, PA. I don't know. What do you think?
So what I tell you is I've seen so many soldiers and airmen that have started off as a medic, have gotten bitten by military medicine and love it, and then decide they're going to become a PA or perhaps a nurse. And then they become a nurse practitioner, or from a PA or an NP, they decide they want to become a doctor. And I watch them go through the progression because they get this love of medicine and a real love of military medicine. And the experiences that they have, the bond, the closeness, I'm sure now that you've been retired a couple of years, that might be one of the things you miss about serving in the military, because when that goes, that's a hard thing to replace. Right. And so what I would say to young people is try it. There's some great benefits that you can get out of it by doing it. If it's not something for you, serve your time and we'll say thank you and pat you on the back and send you on your way. But if it is something that's for you, right, the things that we can do and the opportunities we can provide you, like I've done med readies in Guatemala and Honduras, being able to be in a place and give basic life skills to people, teaching them, hey, if you wash your hands before you eat, you probably won't get sick so frequently, but they don't know that.
Right.
It's just basic things, and you walk away from that and you feel so rewarded. Or you do IRT missions in the state in an economically depressed area, and you go and you do physicals for young kids that couldn't afford to get a physical to be in school sports, and you go and do that, and you're giving back to your community, and just a sense of pride and ownership that you're proud to be in the military and supporting our great nation.
We've been speaking with Major General Jill Faris on this special episode of WarDocs in collaboration with Op Med TV. Ma'am, thanks again for your time.
You're so welcome.
And thank you for your insights and great stories. And man, you have an incredible career.
I have an interesting career. That's for sure. That's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this special episode of WarDocs, made possible by a partnership with the Defense Strategies Institute's Op Med TV. To stay connected with Team WarDocs, visit our website at wardocspodcast.com. Follow us on social media for updates and subscribe to our WarDocs YouTube channel for more engaging content. Your support helps us continue to document the experiences and contributions of military medicine professionals as we honor the legacy and preserve the history of military medicine for the next generation.